On today's Big Ten Preview Part 1, we are talking new faces in the conference, familiar faces in the conference. We are breaking teams into their own different tiers, and we're talking
It's just one of those days.
Fred Durst.
Welcome to the Solid Verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, it is another episode. It is another conference. On today's episode, we are diving in to the Big Ten Part 1. Uno, eins. I am fired up for this. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm obviously excited for any sort of conference preview. And look, we get a lot of feedback here on the Solid Verbal, and I always like to respond in as kind and plain a way as possible. Yes, we've done the ACC. Yes, we've done the Big 12. Yes, we've looked at a number of different G6 or mid-major conferences, and I can already see the complaints ahead of time right now. We have to do the Big Ten and we have to do the SEC. We are completists here. We don't look at them as smaller conferences. We look at them as just other conferences that are worth talking about, Ty. And whatever criticism we get for spending time on the Big Ten and SEC because they're not as relevant, they're not as good as these other conferences, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it because this is quality football too, Ty. And everybody deserves their time in the sun. And I'm very excited to talk about conferences like the Big Ten and the SEC afterwards. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Some have even speculated we should have started with the two underprivileged conferences in college football, but we made an editorial decision to maybe push it off a little bit later, into August.
I just think they deserve attention, Ty. Call me crazy, but I'm willing to say, okay, nobody's really talking about a conference like the Big Ten or the SEC and any the impacts that they may or may not have on the sport. But I guess that's the Solid Verbal difference, right?
This is why people tune into this content. Yes.
So, you know what? I don't want to hear it. Save the emails. I know a lot of people are paging Ty with their opinions about this, but save it.
Save it. solidverbal@gmail.com, as always, is where you can email in if you've got any thoughts. Of course, please hit follow or subscribe wherever it is you find this episode, this content. We would greatly appreciate it. Verballers.com. A lot's going to be going on at Verballers.com here in very short order as we've switched things on now that we've turned the page into August. So if you're interested in helping support the team, Verballers.com is where you can sign up for a bunch of perks. We'll start dissecting those a little bit more as we get deeper into August. And of course, if you've yet to do so, leave a star rating or a review wherever it is you find this content. Now, we didn't do an episode earlier in the week because you were a bit under the weather.
Right.
It seems as though you have now fully recovered.
I'm ready to roll.
If you are ready to roll, should I play the siren? Should I play the news? Because we do have a little bit of news to this.
Because it's the week of Big Ten Media Days and you have news from that, or you just have news in general?
No, I have news about the show.
Oh, news about the show. Hit me.
We have breaking news.
Wow. Mid-season form. What do we have?
I saved up for that one.
I know. You did a great job.
Dan Rubenstein, I am pleased to announce that the Solid Verbal will be taking part in this year's AP Top 25. Whoa. Yes, this is not a drill. The fine folks over at the AP, they have gifted us one golden ballot.
Not gifted, Ty. Earned. We have earned this
we
ballot.
Earned it, yes. This is not a Willy Wonka situation. We have earned one golden ballot. We get exactly one vote, Dan.
Okay.
Lucky for you, it is under my name. So I will be the one, I guess, getting the blowback.
Sure.
For anything that people disagree with. I know this is a thing. Very cool. We're cool with it.
Yeah.
Put our name to it. I should add, we read through the entire code of conduct to make sure we are in the clear. You have reluctantly agreed to stop accepting the private plane trips that you were getting from the University of Oregon. I know it was tough to part with all that.
Sure.
But in honor of, this remarkable opportunity that has been given to us, we also have a plan that has been blessed by the AP.
Oh, okay. Which is?
The plan is that every Saturday night on the live stream, we're going to end the show by debating how we want to vote on behalf of the Solid Verbal. So I will cast the vote. We will discuss it. It will be a collaborative thing. People a lot of times tune in to hear us kind of do that little back and forth because they feel like you bully me and it's funny to watch me get pushed around.
Right.
I will stand my ground, Dan. I have you know, as we launch now into the AP Top 25 era of the Solid Verbal.
Yeah, I just know if you see the others receiving votes and then see a Lehigh 1, I have no
Lehigh's
idea.
not even going to be on here.
I don't believe FCS teams are available,
No.
right?
No.
That's too Harvard 1, right? But
also FCS. Also FCS.
I know. Big Sky team 1. It's not going to be eligible. So, yeah, it'll be cool, man. I'm excited for this. The AP poll has always had a beautiful place in our heart, and I don't know if you are one of those types that way back when said, "Oh man, they shouldn't issue polls until like week 6." I've always been pro poll before the season. Let's be very clear. We can dig up the archives and see where Ty Hildenbrandt stood in 2014. But I've always said preseason polls are terrific. It gets the people talking, and I'm about it.
It gets the people talking, gets the blood pumping.
Yeah.
And look, we're thrilled to be part of it. We appreciate the AP giving us the opportunity.
Yeah.
Of course, after we get done talking about our ballots, we will cast that ballot not only in the AP Top 25, but also in our very own Verballer Top 12 poll, which got a huge facelift this year and will be made available shortly to our community out at verballers.com. So many more details to come on that front, but we're excited to be woven a little bit more deeply into this beautiful college football tapestry going into 2026.
And look, Ty's the one voting, but if any of the coaches who vote in the coaches poll want a shadow voter in Dan Rubenstein, solidverbal@gmail.com.
Listen, there's a code of conduct. We have agreed to conduct ourselves appropriately.
Speak for yourself.
And it's going to be in my name.
I know.
So you're really throwing me under the bus here by even making any insinuations. But
sure.
If people are interested and want to know the thought process, we will be as transparent as we can on Saturday nights when we talk through our vote. I think it'll be fun. I'm excited about it.
Get at me, Jeff Lebby. I gotcha. I don't know.
All right.
Yeah.
Go back and listen to the ACC parts 1, 2, and 3. Go back and listen to the Big 12 parts 1, 2, and 3. We also did a 2-part G6 preview to kick things off. Go all the way the hell back to like July the 7th, somewhere early July, when we did intro to the 2026 college football season. Just a really high level. This is everything changing in case you're interested or if you haven't been paying attention this offseason. We do not cast judgment.
Are we cashing judgment or casting judgment?
We do not cast any stones. I don't know. You know what I mean.
Yeah,
I'm not
continue.
judging. I'm not judging anybody. On today's episode, this is Big Ten Part 1, Dan.
Yes.
The Big Ten has been on is it fair to say, heater over the last 3 years or so?
3 years and 3 days, I guess, if you've been paying attention to the online back and forth between the Big Ten and the SEC. No, the Big Ten has been on a heater. The conference has produced national champions. I'm not big on conference pride in either direction. Root for your team. Hope that you get to watch a bunch of good games no matter which conference you're watching. But obviously, with the notoriety and the attention and the story of Indiana these past couple years, winning the national championship last year, the Jim Harbaugh story at Michigan, you do have to ignore a good amount behind the scenes regarding that path to the national championship for Michigan.
Can't hear you.
Do some earmuffs, but as for the games themselves and the size of Michigan's reach, it obviously grabbed a lot of attention. And Ohio State winning with Chip Kelly and Will Howard and Jeremiah Smith in extremely dominant fashion. It was obviously a close national championship game, but, you know, two big brands, then Indiana sort of ascending to that level in the sport, it seems. It's been a good time for the Big Ten at the end of January recently.
The last 3 national champions have been from the Big Ten: Indiana, Ohio State, Michigan, as you just described. The Big Ten's also won 13 playoff games over the last 3 years. No other conference has won more than 5. So everything is coming up Big Ten and Tony Petitti right now. To that end, it very much feels like the Big Ten is kind of the center of gravity for the sport.
Sure.
And I'm sure SEC people might feel differently or want to feel differently, but the obvious thing is the obvious thing. They've won the last 3 national championships. They've got the biggest conference just in pure numbers. And for lack of better terms, they're driving the bus right now. And all these conversations that we're hearing about where the playoff might go and everything else in the sport, truly, it feels like the Big Ten is is the conference driving the bus, which is a bit of a reversal from where things have been, let's say in the last 15 years. But the Big Ten right now is definitely feeling itself, I guess, in a good way for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not to mention a couple of other teams who have made headlines in the conference. It seems like it has been a good time to be the Big Ten, who also had the men's and women's, I think, basketball national champions, among other sports. So it's been high level. I think it was UCLA won the women's and the Michigan men's team won.
Correct.
So it is high times right now in beautiful Rosemont, Illinois, which is not that beautiful. That's where O'Hare is, but still.
Is that where? Okay,
Yeah.
I was going to say, where is that?
Yeah.
Fair enough. 4 new coaches in the conference at Penn State, a rather notable one in Matt Campbell taking over for James Franklin. At Michigan, it's going to be Kyle Whittingham taking over for Sharon Moore. We can get into that certainly as we dive into parts 2 and 3 when we discuss individual team previews. We will, of course, be talking a little bit more about Whit as we go through contender tiers and whatnot. At UCLA, we've got Robert Edward Chesney taking over as the new head coach. A terrific hairline. One of the best we have in the sport.
100%. I was the odds were off the board when you were going to talk about Bob Chesney that you were going to mention his hairline. Again, I was laid up sick in bed watching all of these Big Ten coaches talk. And as soon as he came on the screen, I was reminded, because I've seen him a million times, but I was like, oh, Ty is this is like Bob Diaco level, Manny Diaz level, Ty and hair. And Ty's got a great head of hair. Anybody watching this on youtube.com/@solidverbal knows. But
Thank you.
Yes, I knew this would pop for you.
No, absolutely. He deserves to be in rarefied air in terms of some of the great college football hairlines we've seen. Mm-hmm. Robert Edward Chesney also stirring up a lot of optimism in Westwood, which we can get into here
Vibes
as we dive
and
into.
Cash are both high. Levels are high.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And Michigan State, Pat Fitzgerald back in the game now. Back in the game, says he doesn't just have a chip on his shoulder. They don't just have a chip on their shoulder. It's actually a bag of chips, Dan.
Yep.
A bag of chips. That's what he said at Media Day, on their shoulders as they try to turn things around up there in East Lansing.
Yeah. I guess it's technically better than many chips, or arguably worse than saying a tube of chips in a very Pringles directed statement. But
I am pro Pringles too.
As am I
will say.
Love a Pringle.
It's not just head coaches. There is really an interesting mix of new coordinators around the Big Ten as well. And it's not just at some of the smaller schools that are trying to, none of these are small schools per se, but smaller brands just on the football side of things. It's not just limited to Rutgers,
right?
Maryland, Illinois. We've got big changes at places like obviously Penn State and Michigan, the places that are turning over their head coach, but Arthur Smith, new offensive coordinator at Ohio State. 2 new coordinators, internal promotions out at Oregon, which I'm sure you'll get into.
Sure.
USC lost their defensive coordinator to Penn State, Dantlin going back to his alma mater, hiring Gary Patterson, in effect kind of coming out of retirement to run the defense for Lincoln Riley. We've got a whole host of them here. I could read down the list. There are many more we can dive in, I think, as time permits, but something interesting to watch. Clint Trickett. Clint Trickett is back.
Mm-hmm.
Clint Trickett has been a coach for a bit, but Clint Trickett now taking over as the offensive coordinator at Maryland, which to me I find particularly interesting. So this is, I think, going to be one of the prevailing themes, certainly throughout the first month of the college football season in the Big Ten. It's not just head guys, but also I think a fair amount that has changed as you go one rung down.
Agree. Yeah, I mean, look, the Big Ten is not short for storylines. I think that's a really good place to start. I think returning quarterbacks and at least familiar quarterback names when you have a couple of transfers in here. But the Big Ten, even with the changes either at head coach at big places like Michigan or Penn State or Michigan State, because Michigan State, this is not a joke, has been a college football playoff team.
Yes.
They should be spoken of as if they are an exclusive club, which they are. And the best of Michigan State has been quite entertaining. But yes, it's the new coordinators at big places that are, you go from familiar names to unfamiliar names with Arthur Smith at Ohio State and the guys you mentioned at Oregon, Drew Maringer and Chris Hampton. But the returning quarterbacks thing with a bunch of changes at coach. So, Dante Moore, Julian Sayin, Bryce Underwood are headliners, but even the new names in the conference are not new names to college football fans, like Josh Hoover and Rocco Becht. And so, Nico at UCLA, Jade Mayava, obviously a huge returning name, is, possibly a Heisman contender. So yeah, that's kind of great for the conference heading into the season, that yes, there are some new names, but the idea of your starting point being a promising quarterback name is terrific, just from a like, oh yeah, I know that guy when I'm turning into USC, Wisconsin or something. Another quarterback who college football fans are familiar with, and Colton Joseph coming over from ODU, perhaps not as many, but is certainly one that we're tracking heading into the season. So it's a great thing for the Big Ten, just in terms of name awareness.
Yeah, and this is something we talked about as we did previous conference previews, be it the ACC, the Big 12, having some of these names that you can sort of like rely on. Some of these, especially in this day and age with college football, where everything gets thrown into a blender every offseason, having some names that having some names that you can kind of associate with a good team or just with a team in a major conference actually goes a long way in this day and age towards building some comfort with what you're about to see in the coming season. I know that might sound goofy, but we get the emails all the time. People don't know which end is up. In many cases, they're tuning into these previews a week or two before the season gets rolling. Having some of those just like bedrocks, for lack of better terms, that you can kind of, set your watch to is actually quite helpful. What I think is going to be the prevailing theme, just from a team standpoint, got a bit of a Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana love triangle at the very top, don't we?
Sure.
We oftentimes will use our friend Bill Connolly's SP Plus as just a measuring stick to get things started. Bill will be the first to admit his SP Plus is by no means etched in stone.
No.
It's just a number on a spreadsheet. And you can sort of use it to suss out who's good and who isn't good as we go into the year.
And it's meant to be predictive too, right?
Meant to be predictive.
Using past data to predict future results. Yeah.
Sometimes it's really right. Other times it's really wrong. It's hit or miss. We found it to be a pretty good measure for things.
Welcome to my marriage, by the way. Am I right? Continue.
Saddle. Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, far and away, if you use Bill's metric, the top three teams in the Big Ten. Now, Ohio State lost the Big Ten title game. Oregon lost to Indiana twice.
What?
Including that college football playoff semifinal.
Very limited memory. Continue.
Dig out any skeletons for you. We do have a situation where Ohio State and Oregon will meet in Columbus as preseason 1 and 2.
You want to come out for that, by the way? You want to come out to the Chicagoland suburbs? That day in college football, right, is astronomically huge.
Yeah. It's a possibility.
We can have a little picnic, invite some friends. I don't know.
We've got Ohio State getting Indiana in a Big Ten championship rematch on another big college football weekend. There is a lot of like cross-pollination here between these three teams.
Yep.
And so I think as just a starting point for anyone out there wondering what's going to be the story in the Big Ten, I think it's going to start with those three teams. There are plenty of there's 18 teams in this conference, so there's plenty of other storylines that we can unpack here, and I think we will over the course of the next hour or so. But just as a starting point, you're an Oregon fan.
Yep.
I know we have a lot of Indiana people who have found the show, and clearly Ohio State is one of our most represented fan bases among the Verballerhood. But being part of that, I think, narrative going into the season has to be pretty interesting and pretty cool on some level for you as an Oregon grad.
Yeah, obviously, my brain goes to the other sport I follow the most closely after college football. And if you go back to the sort of late 2000s, early 2010s, it looked like tennis was going to be all Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal.
Oh,
I'm telling you, that was
Leave
the
it
thing.
to you to bring tennis into a Big Ten preview.
Listen to me. Those two were like, okay, they're playing legendary Wimbledon after legendary Wimbledon. Looked like Federer was going to be a guy. Now Nadal's coming up, and he's like racking up French Open titles. And then Novak Djokovic, Indiana, came into the fold and was like, hey, guys, I'm just going to be better than both of you. Almost not immediately, but came in when everybody thought it was going to be a Big Two, which it kind of looked like the new look Big Ten was going to be with Ohio State and Oregon, and guess what? Novak Djokovic has more majors than either Nadal or Federer. And so you're right that it is a three-headed monster, appearingly, right? Is that a word? It appears to be a three-headed monster right now. But things change, man. Things change quickly. And so it looked like a two-headed. Now we got three-headed. Could be five by, going five wide at Talladega by early November. So I'm excited.
I like that imagery of Curt Cignetti being a joker of some kind. I like that.
Yeah.
Or Indiana just as a whole being a joker card.
There's a lot of there's a lot of overlap, I think, between those two. Like just sort of ruthless killers kind of out of nowhere once they got it figured out when they were sort of looked at as lesser. So,
and the Indiana plot line for them being a joker has also been the kind of thing that I think has driven many other programs around college football crazy. I know to an extent that probably it had to play into what went down at Penn State. Because on one hand, you've got a program in Penn State, which we will discuss here on this episode, had the same coach for 12 years, knocking on the door for 12 years, had a lot of success over 12 years. What they were looking for a year ago was to get over that hump. Meanwhile, Indiana storms from behind like the yellow car in RC Pro-Am, deep cut for the old heads out there.
Great one.
And just figures out a way to build through the portal, to do it quickly with this transcendent coach. And it has to drive all of these other programs that have been knocking on the door crazy. How did they do it so quickly? Indiana, for sure has been not just a storyline over the last year or so, but really since Cignetti got there, it has been an incredible turnaround. The fact that they are now part of this triangle at the top of the conference, I think is really meaningful. And just speaking in terms of how do we vote these teams when it comes time to vote these teams, I don't know. I've already seen people overlooking Indiana because so much is new.
Sure.
New quarterback, new backfield, new pass catchers, some new pass catchers.
Some
anyway.
new, yeah.
Indiana should not be overlooked. Not again. We can't do this to ourselves again and just overlook the Hoosiers.
No. And by the way, that Penn State team, after they fired their coach, put together a 4-quarter performance that was arguably closest to beating the national champion.
I know.
Which in some ways is just like maybe this is just Penn State's lot in life to come close, but, always come up a little bit short no matter who the coach is. But I know Penn State people are very optimistic that Matt Campbell will add some sort of new dimension to the vibes of Penn State and hopefully winning games that they weren't before.
I hate to make this all about the playoff because we know there is much more to talk about in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Beyond the playoff, but we start the conversation with three teams that I think have as good a case as any to make that field of 12 at the end of the year. I think an interesting theme that we're going to need to chart and that we're going to need to just maybe pin up on the corkboard here as we go through Big Ten Part 1, 2, and 3. Will there be a fourth playoff team in the Big Ten is a fascinating conversation.
Right.
That is going to play out not just through the month of September and through the month of October and November, but it's going to be a hot topic for conversation the deeper we get into this thing. Simply because not only is there, I think, a fairly well-defined rung of teams that on the surface, as we do this now in early August, could have a playoff claim, but there is also a grouping of teams that, frankly, could be dark horses. I look at some of these, and we'll get into it, it's a big old shrug for me, Dan. Like,
Agree.
You could see if a couple things go their way, there could be different teams kind of in that conversation that maybe have a case to be made to be in that playoff. Maybe not in the national championship or even the conference championship, but just to be playoff adjacent, I think would be a huge step forward for some of these schools.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to go full on theme here, Ty, which appears what we're doing right now, you stop me when you know what I'm talking about, okay? You stop me when I start making sense to you, because I think you're a good spokesperson for the listening audience. Okay, you ready?
Okay.
Oh, I guess it would be nice if I could touch your body. I know not everybody has got a body like me.
This Limp Bizkit? This is Limp Bizkit.
First of all,
Faith.
How dare you, sir? It is George Michael.
George, okay.
Well, I know your first screen name was Biscuit Boy 38, and
we're men of a certain age, Dan. Okay?
Bizkit, I believe. That's
yes,
how you. Yeah.
Yes.
Look it up. That was Ty's first screen name.
I'm going to take heat. Probably more heat for that than I will any of the AP votes this year. Please continue.
You are of a certain age. That you're a late 90s high schooler. I get it. So was
we
I.
listened to that in the baseball locker room to get fired up,
That was
With
the one?
Fred Durst.
Not break stuff?
No, that was the
Faith.
one.
Okay.
That was the one.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. So when you look across this conference, there is no team absent from the idea of faith in one specific element getting this team to where they need to be or where they'd like to be, from the top all the way down. And it's not a trust thing. I think it's a faith thing. I think trust is just like, I feel this way about A, and therefore B is going to happen because I trust this thing or I don't trust this thing. I think faith is much more of like a benefit of the doubt thing. Do you have faith that Oregon's internal hires are going to be as good as previous guys? Do you have faith that Ohio State replacing what they have on defense is going to continue what they've been doing on defense, especially last year with Matt Patricia? Do you have faith that basically Curt Cignetti is an eternal brutal killer to all who come before him and will just continue to build roster and evaluations accordingly? Do you have faith that, like, yeah, Illinois has won, 17 games these past couple of years? Do you have faith that they're just a good Big Ten team and you should have faith that they're going to continue to be so? Like, do you have faith in like USC has finally figured out defense because of recruiting in Gary Patterson? You can't trust it right now, but if you're a USC fan or if you're a USC believer, a lot of that is faith. And so that to me is a huge deal when you look at least the upper half of the Big Ten. It's a lot of when you look at the upper half of a lot of conferences, obviously. But today we're talking about the Big Ten. And so with the size of some of these programs and with the aspirations of some of these programs, I think that's a worthwhile theme, even if Ty feels like he should be giving credit to Fred Durst for the song Faith.
That was the first thing that came to mind. You said to stop you when I put it all together, and that was the first. I know it's George Michael.
Yeah.
Come on.
Okay. You did say that quickly.
I like that you're going with a little bit of a Ted Lasso theme, right? We got to hang. I have my Believe thing behind me.
Oh, nice.
So
not a
maybe we can
sponsor,
hang
but
that
apparently there's a new season starting up.
Season 4, I believe, is coming out soon. Don't know when, but perhaps we need to hang that Believe sign up.
Yeah.
When we start talking about some of these teams. Okay. Without further ado, should we dive into our contender tiers?
Let's do it.
I feel like I gave the game away a little bit by saying Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana. That's my tier 1. Do you disagree with any of those 3 teams being in tier 1? Should there be any other teams in tier 1?
I do not disagree. I wanted to put an additional team or two into tier 1. I couldn't fully get across the finish line with USC. That was the team. And I think when you look at the roster, when you look at some of the offseason moves, when you look at the upside of having the quarterback they do, having the offensive line that it looks like they will have, when you look at some of the playmakers up front, that you're like, there is potential championship puzzle arranging on this roster. I can't get past the schedule. Now,
schedule's brutal.
Now, I will echo our dear friend Rhett Lashley. Never met him, not our friend. Open to it, but we think it's a hard schedule. But what do we really know in late July, early August as we record and publish this? So it appears it's a very difficult schedule for USC. And even if it's only a moderately difficult schedule for USC, that plus defensive questions, especially up the middle on the linebacking core and what they look like in the secondary, it's not for me I'm out, but it's for me I'm not quite in. I'm ready to flirt with the idea of USC in that top tier, but I need to see where I stand on like October 11th, something like that, October 23rd. And so I was looking for reasons, and I got to see something. Like, I got to see them stop somebody on the ground, right? I got to see, Jade Mayava against a really good team thrive. Or I got to see the depth if they're, beat up somewhere, that, Boobie Feaster or Caden Dixon Wyatt or a guy like that is able to step up as a freshman or, a second-year player, something like that. Because we can't really say red shirts anymore, right? No. I wanted to. I was kind of pushing myself to. I'm not there yet.
So here's the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Devil's advocate take is a team is not its schedule.
Correct.
Right?
Agree with that.
We can make that, and I've made that case about, I've always said the Boise State argument. We can make that case about Notre Dame if we want to. it should cut both ways. Easy schedule, hard schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the SEC. Who knows? But at least within the framework of today's conversation, what if I just make the case that USC is good enough to kind of transcend that schedule? You know, there might be a few more hiccups on it. Yeah, they might take a loss or two, but that shouldn't eliminate them from being just in this contender tier because it is a good team. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I was also searching. Who else can I put in this tier? The first three are obvious, and I promise I will talk about them here momentarily. But I think that whole angle of who is the fourth playoff team, if there is a fourth playoff team, is just such a good conversation to have about the Big Ten. And USC was the team that came to mind first because I think this roster is really good and probably the best among the next rung of teams down. I also can't get past the schedule. I don't want to make it about that.
Right.
But the schedule's really hard. Objectively, it's a brutal schedule, you know?
And look, USC is better at home, which is where they get, Oregon and Ohio State amongst some other quality teams.
Yes.
They've had road issues under Lincoln Riley. But look, even if they get to 10-2 with this schedule, there's a good chance we're having a conversation about USC in the college football playoff.
And I think we should. To be honest with you, I think we should.
So then the question then is, okay, and we'll get more about this in USC. We've got a lot of teams to get to, but it's just like USC is avoiding that one Saturday. That's all it is now for USC because they have the talent outside of those two games. You can make a clear argument outside of the Oregon and Ohio State game, which they have both in the Coliseum. It's, new look Penn State across the country, and it's Indiana, a good distance away. But if you're telling me with this offense that they get one of Oregon, Ohio State, or Indiana, I'm not going to act terribly surprised. The problem then is like, if they're winning one of those games, did somebody replace Lincoln Riley? Right?
No.
They need one of those three. And Lincoln Riley is an inferior coach right now to all three of those coaches, I believe.
Okay, so tier one, we've got Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana. I don't know if that's the proper ordering or not, but Ohio State is the preseason SP Plus #1 team. They bring back Julian Sayin, they bring back Jeremiah Smith, they bring back Bo Jackson, they bring back most of their offensive line. That's a good starting point.
Yes, agreed.
For an Ohio State team. The question that I think we're going to have to grapple with, and we will in part 2 when we talk in a little bit more depth about Ohio State. Remember, this is the big picture. Parts 2 and 3, we go into team previews. We've already broken it down into 9 and 9. So stay tuned. We'll dive in a little bit more deeply to these teams. The big thing on the Ohio State side is going to be that the defense lost most of its spine.
Yeah.
They lost most of their spine. They had an incredible draft class come out of Ohio State, but those guys are not on the team anymore. So what did they do? Well, brought in a pretty good portal class, continued recruiting at an elite level. The Buckeyes will clearly be front stage center as part of any kind of national championship conversation, if not for whatever they're going to do in the Big Ten. But certainly week 2 is probably going to be game of the week of the month of September, if not the year, when they square off against Texas. So we will find out very early what we've got with Ohio State, to what end that defense and some of the attrition there is going to make that big of an impact. But the conversation, I think, in the Big Ten has to start with Ohio State.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Look, and it's more faith. I think it's a combination of trust and faith. But yes, Ohio State should be considered to be a national title contender almost basically perennially under Ryan Day, just because of the level of talent that's constantly there. And they are the feared one. Whatever their schedule is or isn't, and it does look especially rocky this year, in terms of the week in, week out schedule, they're feared by all. So we'll see on the defensive thing, but I don't even think that's their biggest question.
No, I mean, to the point on the schedule, I mentioned Texas, but there's Iowa, there's Indiana, there's USC, there's Oregon, there's Michigan, all on this thing. There is a defining stretch of the schedule, at least to my eye, where they're at Indiana, at USC, and then Oregon.
Yep.
Around a bye with like 2 long road trips before they Oregon is, I think, coming off a bye, or I don't know. It's just a tough schedule. Let's put it that way.
Oregon, before the Ohio State game, has Northwestern at home. Ohio State has USC on the road before Oregon. So
Okay,
a trickier back-to-back for Ohio State. But once again, everybody fears Ohio State.
Yeah, where I'm going with this is 2 long road trips before Oregon comes to town.
Yes.
To square off against the Buckeyes. So that will definitely be tricky. Speaking of Oregon, SP Plus projected number 2 team.
Yeah.
Coming into the start of this season. I think you can make the case that Oregon's probably got the most balanced roster of any team in this conference.
Agree.
Projected as the number 1 SP Plus offense, the number 3 defense, a lot of returning production. The hesitation may not be so much on the roster side, but something we discussed earlier. You got 2 new play callers.
Yep.
New offensive coordinator, defense coordinator, both have been familiar with the program. But to what end does it matter? To what end can they make changes? To what end can they get over the Indiana hump, which was an issue that they had to deal with last year?
Or just the January hump in general, the national championship contender hump in general, with all of their recent losses being to, what was it, Washington, Ohio State, and Indiana, teams who went on to play for the national championship. So like the summit is very clear for them that they have not struggled with the Big Ten, to say the least. They won it in their first year. They lost 1 game last season in the regular season. What's clear is they have built a team to succeed in a big way before January. Now it is, how do they regroup over the holidays and get themselves right? Last year, obviously, they had James Madison and Texas Tech before that moment, but that's the question. And they haven't had to plug a ton of holes, via the portal. They were able to retain a ton on both sides of the ball along the lines. But now it's that question because they're loaded in so many places. They've recruited so well. That's the lingering thing. And Chris Hampton has been a co-defensive coordinator. I think Drew Maringer has been a co-offensive coordinator, but not the play caller. And so now that's the question where it's just like, okay, what are the new twists and turns that these two guys hopefully can present to other teams?
And I'm curious to see what kind of progression we get out of Dante Moore.
Totally.
He came back. He came back to see what he could win. Notably, if we want to speak to that Indiana situation, obviously Dante Moore had a great season, threw for 30 touchdowns. But in the games against Indiana, I got sacked 9 times across 2 meetings. There were snap issues, as you might recall, especially in that playoff situation.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got some growing to do. He's clearly one of the best quarterbacks in college football going into the season. But what kind of step forward do we see out of him? Otherwise, this is a really good roster. Look no further than the defensive line, which might be the best in college football.
It could be the best roster in the sport, but it's an execution thing now.
And then there's Indiana, right? At this point, Indiana, I think, has been much discussed, but defending national champion, they still project as a top 5 team. Curt Cignetti brings his offensive and defensive coordinators intact. It was a really strong, top 10 caliber portal class. There is no longer a question out there as to whether or not Indiana is legit. I think we got over that, hopefully after the first year of Cignetti, but certainly they won the national championship last year. Kind of hard to argue against Indiana at this point. It is a question for me of whether or not what they are building, whether or not the infrastructure they have in place can maintain after the loss of someone like a Fernando Mendoza. And it wasn't just Mendoza who left. There were a bunch of other guys at frankly, all levels of the offense and defense that are no longer with the team. And how do they backfill? What does that look like? I.e., Josh Hoover stepping in for Fernando Mendoza. 2 different types of quarterbacks. Is there going to be any kind of hiccup, or is this just going to be a system like we've seen at other really good programs over the years where you can plug and play a guy and it almost doesn't matter? That, I think, is the next question for me, as we look at this new roster.
Are you willing to tell me that D'Angelo Pons can't hurt me anymore? That I can mark myself safe on Facebook from being affected by D'Angelo Pons? Okay.
But so my question is on Josh Hoover, if we just use that as an example, right? And I know Sonny Dykes had something to say about how many times he turned the ball over. And
right.
Okay, but that completely aside. Josh Hoover does step into this role now at Indiana, where he has turned the ball over a lot. Threw for 9,600 yards in his career.
Sure.
1 million touchdowns. But has turned the ball over 42 times in 31 starts. That is not what Curt Cignetti is after. Can his system get that out of Josh Hoover and not have that even be a factor this season? Can he turn him into a little bit more of a responsible quarterback who is not going to shoot the offense in the foot? I don't know. But I think it's a fair question to ask. I think we have a lot of faith built up now over the years in Curt Cignetti in a very short period of time, but it's a fair question to ask. Is this going to be a recurring trend that we got to worry about now as we try to project Indiana going forward? I don't know.
Isn't it kind of crazy that a coach has been at Indiana for exactly 2 years and we're like, I think we just got to trust this guy to be a killer and destroy everybody who comes into his path without question.
But what are our options?
I totally agree. I'm saying, isn't it crazy that that's the reality in which we live?
It's crazy. Like at this point, if you are doubting Curt Cignetti, you're wearing the clown nose. Like the joke's
I agree.
on you.
I mean, look, you can say that, you know, he had the James Madison dudes for a couple years and there was the carryover with the familiarity with the coordinators and his system and that he was so good at evaluating dudes and developing dudes. But then you're just like, so now he has more resources and a wider net to cast to find great players and coach those guys up and develop them. And now is when we should start doubting him. That feels like a clown nose moment too. So as he adds transfers who want to play for national championships for major programs, notably Nick Marsh from Michigan State coming in and, you know, stepping into one of the receiver spots with Charlie Becker, just like, okay, so start doubting him when he has more to play with. So yeah, this is a good problem to have for Indiana, to be doubted again. If there are people out there doing that, I haven't seen it.
It is. And I don't think I did doubt them last year.
Yeah.
Right. You and I had a conversation. I remember vividly the conversation of, are they going to be 4th or 5th in the Big Ten?
Right. The Illinois game would go a long way to decide 4th place.
Well, maybe that didn't quite go
63
to
to 10 later. Yeah.
Didn't really go according to plans, but good for them.
Yeah.
Good for them. So interested to see what year 3 looks like. Let's go down then into tier 2. We already talked about USC. I think you and I both feel similarly. We don't need to dissect that any further. There is a real question, though, about defense. I think you're right to point it out. Gary Patterson is a bright defensive mind. If you've ever watched any of those coaches casts, Gary Patterson sees the field differently than the other people sitting around the table. In fact, the other people sitting around the table want to hear what Gary Patterson has to say. He's that type of football mind.
Agree.
But bigger picture, how do they deal with the schedule? How quick can he bring the defense together? He has been out of the game for a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, he hasn't been in this role for a while. So what does that look like?
And he has promising names up front, edge rushers, you know, promising beef, which was Ty's alternative screen name beyond Biscuit Boy 38. Promising beef. They went to the portal for the secondary, and there's a lot their starting point roster-wise on defense. It's pretty impressive. But linebacker's a question, and what Gary Patterson is able to do quickly, obviously, like you mentioned, a question.
I was going to say, who else do you have in this tier? Because I have, in this particular order, I have Penn State, Michigan, Washington, and Iowa in tier 2 of my Big Ten.
Okay. I was seduced by Sweet Lady schedule, Ty. I only have one other team in my second tier.
One other team?
Okay. This is what I have listed as the titles of my tiers.
This is spicy.
So
go ahead. Go on.
My contender tier is called For Sure. For sure.
For sure.
My second tier is called Squint. You're just like, I'm not positive, but if I squint hard enough, I can see a path and everything working out. The other team I have in this tier is the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Oh, man. See, Iowa's going to be your pit this year, aren't they? You're really in on Iowa.
Here's what's not hard to do. Trust Phil Parker. It's not hard. It's not difficult to do that. It's difficult to trust the offense, although it's become a little bit easier the past couple seasons. I didn't like where they were at quarterback last year, but regardless, they scored some points in ways that they weren't always able to do before. This year's schedule has seduced me in such a way. They have, you know how many of our tier 1 teams they play, Ty? 0.0.
They avoid
Oregon. They play Ohio State. They avoid Oregon and Indiana. But they avoid USC, which is like my tangential tier 1.
No, Oregon, Indiana, Penn State, or USC on this thing. Yes. They do have a 3-game run where they're at Michigan, home against Ohio State, and at Washington.
Yeah.
But Okay, you're seduced by Lady schedule. Please continue.
They have, I believe, Washington after Washington travels to LA to play USC. And they have Michigan. Well, it's before Michigan plays Minnesota. It's not terribly difficult. And they have Ohio State between Illinois, obviously after Texas, between Illinois and Maryland, whatever. Those games are both at home. But Iowa, again, if you are trusting Phil Parker to figure out defense with some new defensive line pieces, but with potential star power on each level, linebacker experience, rotation experience, secondary experience, and, some star power there. Iowa, again, I don't believe them to be a first-tier team because there are too many questions. But if you're telling me that they could threaten double-digit wins with what they have on both sides of the line and just the experience on both sides and a schedule that's Northern Illinois, new look Iowa State, Northern Iowa, Michigan on the road, Ohio State, Washington. That is a tough stretch with Michigan and Washington on the road. At Minnesota, who they, I think, obliterated last year, right? Wisconsin, Northwestern, Purdue, Illinois on the road will be tough. And they finish with, obviously, Nebraska like they do. I'm just telling you, if Iowa is within a standard deviation of like the best of what they've been lately, you can take a pill right now and wake up in early December and find like 9-3. Okay, 10-2.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if it were any other team, I'd probably be a little bit more bearish. But Iowa's got a pretty high floor.
Yeah,
and I think they're accustomed to figuring it out. At least we're used to watching them figure it out. And this year is no different. 44% returning production, which is not a big number. They do have losses along the offensive line. They have losses at all three levels of their defense, especially along the defensive line. On top of that, we've got an ongoing quarterback battle between Jeremy Hicklinski and Hank Brown that, to my eye, appears to go unresolved deep into camp, if not the first couple weeks of the season.
Yeah.
But it is a terrific schedule. It's a terrific home schedule.
It's a terrific home
Furthermore,
schedule.
If you're an Iowa season ticket holder,
yep.
And outside of the stretch that we defined earlier, between late September and mid-October, it's fairly workable. I would also add to your point about trust, right? There is a question about defensive line. Well, you tend to think that Phil Parker's going to figure things out. There's a question along the offensive line, but this is not usually something that we worry too much about on the Iowa side. Even if it's not as good as it used to be back in the day, it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
You'll still take what Iowa's putting out there more often than not. You factor in that they're going to be really solid, I think, at running back and at tight end. And again, we'll go into all of this as we do team previews and whatnot. I could see it. I was not as high on Iowa as you are. I knew you were going to do this because you've been talking up Iowa all offseason long.
Yeah.
So it's not coming as any great surprise to me.
If I can be just a little bit general before we move on to at least my next tier and / the other teams on your tier, on Iowa's schedule. So if we agree that Phil Parker concocts and creates defensive realities that make life kind of hellish for quarterbacks who are not perfectly on point, right?
Right.
Like a very aggressive zone defense, usually a good pass rush, and they're just locked in, okay? Their schedule of quarterbacks that they will face outside of Julian Sayin, who is legitimately very good with a very high ceiling. If you go through quarterbacks on this schedule, at least, the power conference quarterbacks, it's last year G6 quarterback, Bryce Underwood, Damon Williams, neither of whom were particularly good against strong defenses. Drake Lindsey, who I think has upside, was not good against good defenses last year. We can all agree, Minnesota fans included, Drake Lindsey's best did not come against good defenses at Minnesota last year. Colton Joseph, G6 quarterback last season, right? Aiden Childs, benched quarterback last season. Ryan Brown, okay. One of the worst Big Ten quarterbacks last season. Kattenhauser, G6 quarterback last season. Anthony Calandria, G6 quarterback last season. I shrug if you're not watching on youtube.com/solidverbal. At solidverbal?
You need the at, yeah.
That's a pretty good place to be if this defense is anything.
All right.
Sorry.
Well,
listen, I'm off of my. I have free drinks forever in Iowa City for at least the next month or so.
I'm not as high as Iowa or on Iowa as
I hear you,
but I still do have Iowa in tier 2.
Okay.
My tier 2. So I guess I'll throw this to you since you know who is in my tier 2. Again, it's a handful of teams.
Michigan, Penn State, USC.
Penn State, Michigan, it's Washington, and then it's Iowa. Is that, I guess, what your next tier down then would look like? Do you have Penn State, Michigan, and Washington in there?
I have Illinois there too. I don't know what more they need to do. Now, obviously show that their own G6 quarterback is, worth the expense and the travel and the effort. But I mean, Illinois is replacing a defensive coordinator. Illinois has definite issues to address.
I don't know.
They just keep winning, man. Like, it's faith that they are a winning program, which you don't have yet.
They won 9 games in a bowl last year. They are replacing Luke Altmaier, who was very good for them.
Yeah.
It's not just Luke Altmaier. It's 4 offensive line starters. It's a good chunk of their front 7. Their defensive coordinator, who went to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And a ton of position coaches. There's a lot new. With Illinois. And I think Bielema's done a good job. But you layer on Cat and Hauser. It's a lot of hand waving for me to just put Illinois that high up. Now, to that end, you structured yours a little bit differently than mine.
Yeah.
But I've got Illinois at the top of my 3rd tier. So
See,
I don't
they
think
are
we're
my
that
third.
far
so
off.
They're in our 3rd tier. We've just structured it differently. Yeah.
We structured it differently.
Yeah.
So I get it. I think there is a case to be made that Cat and Hauser actually could be quite good, regardless of where he played last season. I think there's a case to be made that the secondary keeps him in a really good spot. But this version of Illinois, to me, has a lot less continuity than like the veteran team we saw a year ago. And so I can't get quite as high on the Illini as I think you are.
Okay. Here's the counterpoint. Their defense wasn't always that good last year. Their offensive line wasn't especially good at everything they tried to do. They let up a bunch of pressure last year. And so if they did make changes, some of those changes are not the worst thing ever, potentially. Hauser was good for ECU.
He was really good. Yeah, he was really good. And he speaking of veterans,
yeah.
Hauser's been around. Like, if you've listened for the last couple of years, you've heard the name Hauser. Not a new player by any stretch.
Right. And Big Ten experience. So there's that, I guess. So
sort of, yeah.
Yeah, Michigan State. So if we can agree that Illinois exists in a plane of the Big Ten where they're clearly not as talented and can't really hang with the best. Although the Ohio State game, they were closer than that final score indicated. Ohio State, that was like an end of game situation, which still, like, you got to win the games you play. The Wisconsin game was ugly last season. But otherwise, they weren't as good as Washington. They weren't as good as Ohio State. They weren't as good as Indiana. And last year's team was not especially good at anything beyond really stopping big plays. And so they weren't overwhelming on 3rd down on either side of the ball. They were not overwhelming in the red zone. And they win. And so there's something, it was 8 games plus the bowl. So it was 9 games, including the bowl. It was Tennessee is who they beat in the bowl game. They're in the Southeastern Conference? Okay.
Settle.
I believe in Illinois having a clearly defined ceiling, but being better built and having a higher floor than a lot of what I see in this conference. And so for that reason, the schedule is pretty good this year. I think we can agree. Schedule?
I mean, you're way too high on these guys, but yeah.
We both have them in our 3rd tier. We've just structured how many teams are in each tier differently. So, yes.
I've got more. Where do you have them, though, in your 3rd tier? Like, you don't have them above Penn State, above Washington, above Michigan, do you?
I think I have them above Washington, but that was sort of interchangeable to me.
Ugh. See, I don't like that.
Okay.
I don't like that at all. I agree with the schedule. They don't play Indiana. They don't play Michigan, Penn State, USC, or Washington. But they do have Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, and Nebraska on this thing. So there's a late stretch in this thing for Illinois where if they don't get it figured out, they're going to get clobbered.
Sure. I don't mind their road schedule at all for Illinois. They have Ohio State on the road and then probable winnable games if their act is together, and Hauser's pretty good.
We've been talking about Cat and Hauser a lot.
Yeah.
When we get into the Illinois team preview, we could talk about their defense.
Agreed.
Because the defense is going to be an interesting thing. They're switching it up to a 3-3-5 and Bobby Houck. We can go through that. a little bit later and what that means and why that would look different than what we've seen over recent years. But again, there's no shortage of interesting storylines in this conference.
Yeah, they finished 83rd in points per drive allowed and went 8-4. It's pretty good.
We got to talk about Penn State. I'm pretty high on this Penn State team.
Okay.
I'm pretty high on this Penn State team. I've seen it referred to as a blended family in more places than just one. We can call it whatever we want. Matt Campbell brought a bunch of guys with him from Iowa State. It's like most of the best guys from Iowa State coming over here, including Rocco, Becht, Carson Hansen, Ben Brahmer, 2 wide receivers. You get the picture. Bill Connolly's SP Plus still sees Penn State as a top 20 caliber team. The schedule, if you want to do the schedule thing, is very appealing. Okay? Very appealing. There is no Ohio State. There is no Oregon. There is no Indiana. There is no Iowa. These are 4 teams that we have already talked about on that top rung of the Big Ten.
Right. And to be clear, there's no Cincinnati and no Colorado, to whom Iowa State and these players lost last season. So that's good.
That was mean. That's a little mean, I think.
Hold on. Where are the lies told? Continue.
There are no lies told. No lies. There is a pivot point in this season in October. Hosting USC. The following week, they go on the road to play Michigan. That's when we're going to find out what Penn State's made out of.
Sure.
Could be other games along the way. Big Ten's a big conference. They're going to talk about a bunch of big games here. They play Washington on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I don't want to omit that. But in particular, that stretch in October, hosting USC, going on the road to play Michigan, to me, is where we're going to find out what this team is made out of. But I like what I've been seeing. I like what they're bringing to State College on offense. I think, weirdly, after years of just sort of assuming Penn State would have an edge rush, there's a question about who are going to be the reliable edge rushers.
They've
What's the pass rush
legit studs? Yeah,
going to look like? You know, it's going to be a different feel this year. It's not exactly going to be the same thing that we're accustomed to. I think in many ways for the better. But the most important thing to emphasize, and it probably does not bear repeating after we spent so much time at the top of this episode talking about what Indiana did and Kurt Cignetti, and you can build a program out pretty quickly. You can do it quickly now, especially when you're bringing in guys like Matt Campbell who already have familiarity with the system. I said it almost immediately upon hearing that Rocco Becht was going to Penn State. Rocco Becht could be Penn State's best quarterback in forever. We can go back a pretty good ways. And, he may have a bit of a ceiling, but I like what Rocco Becht is going to bring to State College.
Okay.
I do. I think, it's going to be a more explosive offense. They've got all the pieces that they need for this to be a really, really, really good season in State College. I actually had them right below USC in my next tier down because I think the schedule works to their favor. I think the familiarity that a lot of these guys have with the system works to their favor. There's a lot to like with Penn State this year. I got people around here we're beating people, keeping people all away from the doors here.
Yeah, of
people
course.
Trying to beat down the door with sticks, trying to get our opinion on the hometown teams. Of course.
Lehigh?
A lot of Lehigh people just knocking on the door.
A lot of Temple thoughts? Yeah.
Want to know my thoughts? People want to know about Penn State. I get this more often than not.
Yeah.
Is Penn State going to be good this year? My answer is yes, they should be. They should be very good. They should be in this conversation. So if we want to have a conversation about is there going to be a 4th playoff team in the Big Ten, I don't know how realistic that is for Penn State, but I think Penn State's got as much a case to be made as I think any of these other teams that we're talking about in like this portion of the episode.
It's a great schedule. It is a great schedule. Getting USC to come across the country, a game like that, if Penn State is of second tier Big Ten, which means they're threatening for a potential 4th spot in the playoff, we'll see. It's a really nice schedule. They travel to Michigan after Michigan gets a bye. I understand that's going to be difficult. But otherwise, no Indiana or Ohio State. Traveling across the country to play Washington is not nothing, but it's not obvious. And so I'm with you on your Penn State optimism for a number of the familiarity factors, you are placing a lot of your Limp Bizkit Fred Durst faith in Rocco Becht ascending to upper half of a more difficult conference's group of quarterbacks from lower half of a worse conference and their group of quarterbacks, of which he was a member last season. He was one of the lower third tier quarterbacks, whatever, of the Big 12. He did I don't know if it was an injury thing. I don't know if it was losing the receivers that he lost after 2024.
He was hurt.
Definitely a factor. I'm just telling you, you are banking on a launch from Rocco Becht from wherever he was injured last year to where you're thinking he has a possibility of getting to with coaching continuity, with teammate continuity. They don't have defensive coordinator continuity. If you're going to make any sort of Cignetti analogy, it's a new defensive coordinator, new system for Matt Campbell and the returning Penn State players and the new Penn State players. So that's new in a way that it wasn't for Cignetti and Brian Haynes. But I understand the optimism and the upside. I think it's a year 2 thing for me, though.
Well, look, the question about Rocco Becht, I think, is fair. He brings 39 starts to State College.
Yep.
He should bring a command of this offense to State College, but he had shoulder surgery back in December.
Yep.
And so his reps, at least at time of recording, have been relatively limited with this crew. We'll see. Even though he knows a lot of the guys, we'll see.
Hey, look, you're an elite athlete with shoulder surgery experience. Can you speak to the ins and outs of what's going on with whatever Rocco Becht?
I think we actually had the same injury. Yeah,
there you go. Were you ready to throw into Big Ten defenses a few months after your surgery?
I'm still not ready, believe it or not.
12 years later.
Michigan.
Yeah.
Is Michigan in this tier for you?
Yes. Michigan's here. They return enough on both sides of the ball. The upside is there because of what they're going to look like in their backfield, depending on what Bryce Underwood does or doesn't do, both with his arm and his legs. Kind of feels like the entire season. With offensive line experience, with an improved group of pass catchers, with the guys they bring back on various levels of the defense, with the resumes of the guys calling the offense and defense. I'm in on the upside of Michigan. I'm just not positive we're going to see, against a schedule that also includes Oklahoma, albeit at home this season, Bryce Underwood throwing into the defenses of Oklahoma, Iowa, Penn State, Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State. Yeah. It's a longer list than I'd love to see if we're hoping that Bryce Underwood takes the next step. Now, it's like could be an iron Shapen's iron situation where maybe he struggles in those first couple games, but they really get into a rhythm with figuring out where the offense should go after seeing him against a couple of those teams, and they're a different team the second half of the season. I'm open to that. So I'm in on Michigan as a reasonably dangerous team. I just have my reservations at the moment.
I'm really curious to see how they use Bryce Underwood. As you said, new regime. Kyle Whittingham basically fell off the back of a truck, right? So they fire Sharon Moore pretty late in the cycle. Kyle Whittingham had whatever he had with Utah and was available. I think on the Michigan side, it worked out quite well. They needed an adult. I don't know if you've heard any of what Whit has said through Big Ten Media Days, but just giving very adult responses. It's like very refreshing.
He continues to be an impressive dude. Yeah.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Another incredible hairline. Yeah. Given his age,
agree.
One of the best we've seen.
I'm jealous.
But this is a good roster. It should keep them competitive, certainly with the best teams in the conference that we've discussed here. But as you alluded, the problem is they basically play all of them.
Yeah.
They play all of them. So you could see this being a better team than the final score or final record, would indicate when all is said and done. And on top of it, there's just so much new that given the schedule, there's just not much wiggle room to kind of grow into the season.
Right.
And that always kind of skis me out a little bit. I am curious, though, to see what they do with Bryce Underwood and what this offense looks like with Jason Becht now at the helm. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to use him a lot more as a dual threat guy. They're going to try and use him much more as part of the running game. Bryce, for whatever you make of spring practice and spring scrimmages, Bryce Underwood's spring line was not great when he was out there, but I take that with a grain of salt. I don't know if he can really base anything on that. It's just, let's wait and see what Jason Becht cooks up.
Agree. Has a
Michigan
really
deserves,
nice
though,
track
I think,
record
to be in this tier. We didn't mention Washington yet.
Yeah.
So I know we structured this a little bit differently. I'm not trying to confuse the audience at home. You know my top 3 teams. You and I are both in agreement on who the top 3 teams are. My second tier down was in this order: USC, Penn State, Michigan, then Washington, then Iowa. And then if we go into tier 3, I had Illinois. So we're not that far off. But the Washington conversation to me is pretty interesting. Where are you at with Washington?
I'd like to know what's improved over last season, a year in which they struggled against the good teams on their schedule. Like, that's the question to me. It's like they have their own summit, and it seems like they've gotten, if nothing else, greener at skill positions, right? Losing both of those running backs, one to the draft, one to transfer. There's promise at receiver, but they're a lot greener there. And so Damon Williams is back, which is obviously a positive thing for Washington. But then you look at the defense and you say, like, okay, maybe there's something along the defensive line. Maybe if some of these transfers work out. There's definitely something there at linebacker, though they did get thinner there. I think they lost one of their better dudes to SC, I want to say. And then there are secondary questions. So they look pretty solid, if not really good at safety, but they're replacing corners. And so now you ask yourself, okay, well, we're in year 2 of having what I believe to be a definitely good defensive coordinator in Ryan Walters. But defense to me is still, against this conference, against some of the quarterbacks that they're going to face, can you out scheme and get away with it without having top line talent, especially up front? I just think that there's a set ceiling for Washington. I know that the offensive playmakers are going to emerge. They generally do with Jedd Fisch offenses. But are they going to emerge in a way where now suddenly they are competing in the fourth quarter with the best of their schedule? We have a limited amount of data of, Jedd Fisch at Washington, but they finish with Indiana and Oregon. They host Penn State, which is good. And they're going to have to score a certain amount of points in the first month or so of the season when they travel to USC. And they're going to have to figure out the Iowa defense a week later. So that to me is like, how quickly do they find those dudes? Do those dudes exist up front on defense? And are they able to stay in those games for 4 full quarters and give themselves a chance at the end? To me, it's a pretty open question.
I mean, if we're looking only at teams in the top tiers, Washington hosts Iowa. It's actually a good spot for them to host Iowa.
Definitely.
It's 1 week after a run of
They have
going
good
to
spots
Michigan.
everywhere, by the way. They're a really nice sandwich and situational team.
But they've got Iowa. They've got Penn State. As you mentioned, they've got Indiana. It's a week after Indiana hosts USC, so maybe a little bit of a letdown situation.
Yep.
But, Washington will get a crack at some of these better teams on the schedule. You talk about the defense and how the defense holds up. Let's talk about Damon Williams, right? I agree. Damon Williams, pretty good quarterback. I agree. Damon Williams, in general, the Jedd Fisch offense usually gets it figured out. This year, they come into the year with 4 offensive line starters back. A fair amount of returning production from a 9-win team. Guess what Washington averaged points-wise against the better teams in their schedule a year ago?
Like 8.5?
Namely Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Yeah. How many points?
9.3.
Yeah.
9.3.
And that's with Jonah Coleman, Adam Muhammad, Denzel Boston. I think Desmond Robick is back, obviously. But You're like, okay, so whether it's transfers, whether it's younger guys assuming bigger roles, they have to be clearly better than some of those guys. And the offensive line has to be clearly better. And Damon Williams has to be clearly better, which, look, quarterback's a developmental position. He will be better this year. Like, it's a quarterback-friendly coach. It's a quarterback-friendly offense. I mean, the other question to me is like, are they going to, he's very athletic. Obviously, there's a reason why teams allegedly wanted him to enter the portal.
Did you see Jedd Fisch compared it to a failed trade?
Oh, like somebody asked for it, like demanded a trade, and they sort of went behind the scenes.
Yeah, they asked him about it at Media Day, and he was like, well, it's like when a player wants to be traded, but then it doesn't work out, and he's back with the team. Okay, that fits. I could go with that.
I wonder about, we'll get into this more on the Washington specific preview, are they going to utilize his legs? Is that going to be part of this offense? Does he want to utilize his legs? Does Jedd Fisch want to there's just those open questions to me about what the offense actually looks like in specifically those games. because now that's the next step. That's the clear next step for Washington, because we know they can mount an offense and defense to compete with the sort of middle class and lower class of the Big Ten. What's the next step?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easily a top 25 caliber roster.
Sure.
I like the roster, despite the fact that there are some key losses. I like that there is some continuity here. My concern is whether there's continuity at the right spots.
Right.
At the right spots, and we'll see. So I think we have a fair amount of agreement on Washington. Here is my next grouping of teams.
Yeah. By the way, I did look it up. It's Iowa at home, and it's Iowa a week after Ohio State, USC a week after USC plays Oregon, and Indiana a week after they play SC, as you mentioned. So potential advantages are there. Continue.
Here is the grouping of teams that I then list after Illinois.
Okay.
Online. So I kind of feel like we're relatively aligned here.
Agree. I have 5.
After Illinois, I have Minnesota, in this order. Minnesota, Nebraska, UCLA, and Wisconsin.
My first 4 in the next tier are, in order, exactly what you just said.
Really?
Yes. Our electrons are vibrating at, do electrons vibrate? I have no idea. At the same frequency. Minnesota, Nebraska, UCLA, Wisconsin. Though I do include Maryland at the bottom there in my tier.
Interesting.
I
have Maryland. I have Maryland at the next tier down for me, whatever number that is.
Play the breaking news sound, Ty. Play it
you
for me when you have
news? Let me find it here.
Find it?
Okay, here we go.
Maryland's going to win a game in October or November this fall.
What?
Boop, 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 boop.
Don't get it. Don't get crazy.
And for that reason, they are in this tier for me.
The Minnesota thing is always interesting. For those Minnesota fans out there wondering, yes, I will be holding the Minnesota support Zoom call at some point in early December.
Yeah.
If you are interested in that, I will give out details when we do the Minnesota specific preview.
Fair.
On one of our next 2 episodes. I won't do it here. But look, you were fired up. You were laid up as you were healing from whatever malady you had. But you were listening to PJ Fleck do the whole Tony Robbins thing at Big Ten Media Day.
He was was like on TV, like a B12 shot for my health needs.
I mean, the dude knows how to get the blood pumping.
I had elite nausea in that moment.
Very much built for center stage. And Minnesota brings back 68% of their production this year.
Yeah.
They won 8 games a year ago. They project to have a top 25 defense. The concern, I think, is an offense that last year was not explosive at all.
No.
Not in the least bit. They also have an interior defensive line this year that I'll, again, talk more about on the preview, but an interior defensive line that to me looks very gettable against the schedule. So, bigger picture, you look at the schedule. Last year, Minnesota went 7-0 at home, 0-4, in true road games a season ago.
Not ideal.
And this year, there are some really tough road games. Questions.
Yeah.
I got questions about this team. Forever, I am just sort of a little higher on Minnesota than most. I don't know why. That's more of a me thing than a them thing.
It's okay. We all have our kinks, Ty.
That's why I'm doing the Minnesota Zoom call.
Yeah.
I need it as much as the Minnesota people who listen. But
that's
it sounds like
happening
we're
again?
at least. It sounds. Yeah, I'm going to do it again. Absolutely.
Sometime in
That was fun last
mid-December?
year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Okay.
That was a lot of fun, actually. I really like that.
I think it's a great call.
And maybe we'll throw NC State people on there as well.
Yeah.
Just group all together these teams that I have an unhealthy addiction to. But
yeah.
We're aligned here, it sounds like, on Minnesota. We both agree on where they belong in this conversation.
Yeah, there are pieces with Minnesota. The name of this tier for me is just major questions. The last tier, the previous one with Penn State, Michigan, Illinois, Washington, to me was upside, but questions. There are major questions for a lot of these teams, right? And how they're going to essentially get to 8 games, how they're going to get to 8 wins. That's, to me, the defining question of this tier. There's a lot of ability with Drake Lindsey. Obviously, I think it's what Anthony Smith off the edge is a terror, right? There are star power pieces. There's the forever, eternally questionable Darius Taylor in the backfield for Minnesota. But the best of Darius Taylor against
It's really good.
Decent Big Ten teams can be very, very good. I think Mo Ibrahim is their new running backs coach, if you want to feel ancient.
Good Lord.
But yeah, a lot of questions with this Minnesota team that allowed too much on defense, that, as you mentioned, was one of, I think, the least explosive offenses in America. So it's easy to see the upside in Drake Lindsey's ability. It's difficult to see it when they don't complete passes downfield all that often. So yeah, I think Minnesota will go bowling. The road stuff, the close game stuff, year to year is always a challenge. So I just don't know week to week what Minnesota we're getting, which I think is probably the theme of why you're doing Zoom calls. So I can't have them any higher than this, but I think the floor is pretty high.
I think the floor is really high. Yeah. And I think if nothing more, that's something that Fleck has brought with him.
Yep.
Fleck has built that floor, and it's not made out of cheap drywall. It's solid. It's wood. It's stone. It's
leaky ceiling, but yeah,
leaky
the foundation's
ceiling.
great.
The foundation's good.
Yeah.
Nebraska's next up for me, third nationally in returning production. They changed some of their leadership specifically to try and fix the offensive line, try and fix the run defense, try and fix special teams. I think it's an experienced roster. I think they're experienced enough to break through on some level. I worry that there's a little too much volatility, though, especially when Anthony Calandria, whom I love Anthony Calandria. I love that pairing of Calandria with Dana Holgerson.
Yeah.
Speaking of volatility, that's like
sure.
the epicenter of volatility.
Mm-hmm.
But tough schedule, I don't know. I'm mixed on Nebraska. There's a decent floor in place.
Buddy, they just have two schedules.
They're
like a 5-1 team that could finish 5-7. Like, they're just one of those teams where, if we're talking about a strong foundation, they're in a canoe that is with leaks potentially popping up at any given moment, right? That last year they had like a great secondary. They were great against the pass. Couldn't stop anything on the ground. Like, I think Justice Haynes is still running in that game. So, I don't love Anthony Calandria in a volatile situation with high expectations. I like him in a vacuum. I like Dana Holgerson in a vacuum.
I like him as the quarterback for any other team.
Right. Like,
just not mine.
Just like the Matt Rule vision for offense over the course of a season and the building of an offensive roster, to me, still leaves a lot to desire to feel good about a Nebraska team under Matt Rule. Now we're also talking about, we didn't fully mention it in any sort of depth, but like third defensive coordinator in 3 years. So Matt Rule can't figure out quarterback fully. Now, last year was an injury situation, and hasn't been able to figure out defense consistently. So what is Matt Rule there for exactly? Right? And
Matt Rule's there because he's got like a gazillion-dollar contract at this point.
Do you know that they again have the number one quarterback in America committed for next season? This is 100% true. He's local. So that makes more sense. I think he's from Omaha. I want to say his name is Trey Taylor, but that's looming over this season as well. I think they can be okay. I think they can be decent. But, buddy, am I going to need to see like the same Nebraska week to week to week to feel all that good about them?
They play Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, Washington, and Iowa.
Yeah.
They finish out, to your point earlier, with road games at Illinois and Rutgers, Ohio State at home, and then Iowa on the road for the Heroes game. So, yeah, it just kind of keeps coming at them. And I hear you. I want to be a little bit higher on Nebraska. I like Calandria as an entertainment product.
Yeah.
He will be fun to watch, if nothing more. But I do worry about that volatility.
Yep.
And a tough schedule.
And even,
frankly.
by the way, it's at Illinois and at Rutgers in that back half. Those are not gimmies for a team like where Nebraska's been these past couple of years.
So we got a bunch of other teams to discuss here. We knew the episode was going to run a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But we've come to the point in our conversation today where we get to speak of the virtues of one Robert Edward Chesney.
Yes.
Some of you know him as Bob. He is the new head coach at UCLA. He accepted the gig from James Madison. He is, on some level, attempting a Curt Cignetti-style rebuild out at UCLA.
Yes.
I think the roster is decent. Clearly, the money has followed. There is a lot of optimism out west right now. It's not just Chesney. It's not just numerous former James Madison players. It is both coordinators. In total, I think it's something like 41 transfers. On top of it, you got Nico coming back, Nico Iamaleava. 67% returning production to boot. I think there's some real upside here, Dan.
I do too.
There's real upside. I think I want to be a little bit more optimistic about UCLA. Because sometimes in order to just push a program in the right direction, you just need the right personality. We have seen that happen time and again.
Yeah.
You also need lines. And I'm having trouble trusting offensive, defensive line. If I felt a little bit better about the trenches at UCLA, I would be inclined to push them a little bit higher. I can't go higher than this. That said, there is a collection of teams. I put UCLA in there. I put Wisconsin in there. If you gave me a strong enough substance, I might be willing to put Maryland in there as well. Teams that I look at and I say, there's real wild card potential here that I can't fully put my finger on in early August.
Right.
So UCLA is interesting on 1,000 different fronts. I wish I felt better about the lines. I'd be higher on them if I felt better about the lines.
Yeah. UCLA has absolute playmakers on both sides of the ball in totality, but they're thin. They're just thin. It's going to take recruiting. It's going to take a portal class or two. And I think they probably max out this year at feisty, and that's okay. I think with a couple breaks, they can go 6 or 7-5, 6-6, right? That they can be feisty, that they can steal a win with good coaching and maybe perfect health kind of thing. It's a lot to ask. I think Nico has a ceiling, but we've seen the best of him at UCLA is at least interesting, and they will max out a lot of these players. They have good coaches. They've brought in a number of good players, but like 63, 61 new players, whatever the number is, that's too many to feel good about a team. And the schedule's not horrible, right? It's not a horrible year one schedule, but also if it's year one, new coach, thin in terms of line talent and depth or whatever, you got a Cal team week one. You have Maryland across the country, Oregon pretty early on in the first half of the season. And you're hosting teams that should at least have like Wisconsin should be of quality sometimes. Minnesota on the road is going to be difficult.
I think they'll be better than that, but okay. Point taken.
You think they're going to be better than Wisconsin?
No, I'm saying Wisconsin. Well, we'll talk about Wisconsin next. I think Wisconsin's going to be better than you just described them as. But
no, I think Wisconsin can be of quality sometimes. You think they're going to be quality 12 straight games? I don't know.
Recent history would suggest otherwise.
Correct. So, at Michigan, at Minnesota, like obviously it's a West Coast team and some travel is going to be involved here. They finish with a good team and a rival. And they have Illinois in the middle of that in the back. Like, it's just they're playing against a roster of teams that have built up those rosters for longer and have more interesting and varied ways to win. Whereas I think UCLA will show absolute proof of concept in year one. I just don't know what that means. I'm unreasonably excited for the next 2 or 3 years of UCLA football from afar, but I'm not there yet. Like when I see that number, it makes me think of like Rich Rod in West Virginia. We agree Rich Rod is a good college football coach. We agree that he has won a lot of games wherever he's been, for the most part. They beat a good Houston team last year. They beat Pitt last year. They just didn't have the roster to do it week to week to week. And that was, a product of you just can't hit on 80% of 60 dudes when you're attacking the portal for so much of your roster. So I'm in on UCLA. I think they're going to win an absolute like crazy game this year. But
yeah, I think part of the downside for the rest of college football with the Curt Cignetti phenomenon is that there is perhaps an unrealistic expectation that everyone can kind of do that too. Oh, he did it. He took a program that might have been the worst in all of FBS college football, and he turned them into a national powerhouse in a shade under 2 seasons.
Well, the issue is Bobby C came from the same place.
Well, Bobby C came from the same place, and that's my point, right? My point is, it's not just the Cignetti thing, the phenomenon that we see around college football, where fan bases point to it and say, well, he could do it. Why can't you? It's almost doubly the case for someone like Robert Edward Chesney.
Yeah.
Our Lord and Savior.
And UCLA is
because
he
came from that tree.
But UCLA is a traditionally more advantaged place than Indiana. Not necessarily because they don't have more money or whatever than Indiana necessarily, but there is a lot of money at UCLA. It's more that like, oh, UCLA is a place where people can win some, where that's never been the case in Bloomington.
I like the fact that they've got a little bit of a runway. The schedule starts off 4 teams outside the SP plus top 50. So that gives them a little bit of runway to get things started.
JKS week 1, though, right?
Correct.
They're going to need to win that game. If they're going to win, they're going to beat Cal on the road, right? It's in Berkeley?
Yeah.
Welcome to 38-35ville.
Wisconsin, Dan. Wisconsin.
I put myself out there at the bar to be seduced by Sweet Lady's schedule, and she had no interest in me. I was not seduced. I acknowledge the beauty and mystique and fragrance of Sweet Lady's schedule in Wisconsin's case, because they finally have an advantageous schedule.
Finally, I should have trumpets or something here on the soundboard, but we'll save those for the Wisconsin team preview. It feels good to finally have a schedule in Madison that is a little bit more favorable, that actually gives them a shot, perceived or in reality, for them to take a step forward in terms of the final record.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is still an offense that ranked 106th in preseason SP+. There's still a climb there in order for them to be functional. But I like the situation where you've got a coach who is fighting to try and save his job. Again, entertainment factor, sure. Mm-hmm. But I think Luke Fickell understands the assignment. I think he's a smart guy. I love their quarterback acquisition in Colton Joseph, who comes over from Old Dominion. Dual threat quarterback, right? I still like the fact that they've got a defense that projects to be top 25 caliber nationally. So there's a lot here, I think, to like. The fact that the schedule gives them something of a breather as compared to the last 2 years is notable here. Still a long way to go.
Yeah, I'm okay. So my view of the Colton Joseph thing is I think he in a vacuum is a very good quarterback. We'll see on what level. I don't think he finished the year that strongly last year at ODU. Now there's a lot at play. But I think he lit up Virginia Tech. He had a good game. He threw a couple picks against JMU. So I like that he had some of his better games against opponents like that. Colton Joseph feels like a quarterback that if he were the missing piece at Wisconsin, if like offensive line and receiver was in place, or their front seven was like, oh man, this group is going to be like one of the 15 best defenses in the country because of all these dudes returning, like it's 2018 or something. And now they had Colton Joseph as like, oh, here's an interesting playmaker who's an improvement over your Alex Hornibrook type situation, who was totally fine.
Alex Hornibrook.
He wasn't great at Florida State, but he was totally fine.
No. Yeah.
That would be a great situation in Madison for Colton Joseph. But now you're saying new receivers, new running back, maybe some offensive line questions, maybe some defense questions, even though there is a decent amount returning. Like it's a totally like rebuilt secondary, I believe, something like that. There's a lot that needs to be decided on this defense. I'm not out on Wisconsin. I think they can be a terror. I've called them like the potential to be a bucket of wrenches or something rolling down the track.
Yeah.
I just don't see how they can be more with what this roster looks like heading into the season. And I know they've spent more on this year's roster. I know that they've been aggressive. I know that Luke Fickell has more support than ever. But in this conference, even with this schedule, I'm just like, But what is it that you're going to do really well to make it different this year against like a gettable schedule? And I don't have the answers on my fingertips at the moment.
Can I tell you what scares me?
Yeah.
What scares me about Wisconsin this year, and I love Colton Joseph. I think Colton Joseph, his ability to run, that adds a completely new dynamic to this offense.
Yep.
what has been something of an Achilles heel for Wisconsin over these last couple seasons?
Almost everything.
Beyond that, if we want to zoom in a little bit, quarterback health.
Yeah.
Quarterback health in particular. Colton Joseph has taken a lot of sacks. A lot of sacks.
Mm-hmm.
His pressure to sack rate is high. His turnover history is high.
Yeah.
And this is a rebuilt offensive line. I don't want to see a repeat of what we have seen at Wisconsin with quarterback health. But
it's been a thing.
You'd be remiss to not at least ask the question given the circumstances here. Yeah, maybe he's a little bit fleeter of foot, and maybe they'll design an offense that, takes some of that concern out of the equation. But
the math says
he's taking a lot of hits. So I'm just
I hear you.
New line. There's just I think it's fair to wonder, even though this guy brings something new to Madison.
If every quarterback gets hurt, right? Is it a spinal tap situation, or is this just like mathematically it just can't happen every year? That they're eventually going to have a healthy quarterback situation. I don't know.
I mentioned Maryland a lot back, second nationally in terms of returning production. They were able to retain like a really young core. Instead of chasing like a really large portal class, they were able to retain their core, which I like.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're interesting because there is a lot back. I think they're interesting because they're still trying to turn, like just catastrophic end of season situations into a better story in the Big Ten. Like they got to get past that. And I have yet to see overwhelming evidence that they will.
Right. I'm in on Maryland to be in this tier. They were not in this tier last year. I'm happy to include them with Minnesota, Nebraska, UCLA, Wisconsin, because I don't think the barrier to entry for that tier is especially high. Like, Maryland has a promising young quarterback who's throwing to new receivers. They have a pass rush that could be among the conference's best, and they're adding a 5-star edge rusher to, Zaire Mathis and Sidney Stewart. Is that his name?
Right.
It's Zion Ely is the new 5-star.
He's a new dude. Yep. The token 5-star recruit that Maryland gets every year.
Right. I said this in the offseason. Maryland has questions. They made a change on offense. They're returning a bunch. They need to figure out how to run the ball. If a starting point is promising young quarterback, I don't know what Malik Washington's ceiling is, whatever, but he's the established guy. He's faced these teams. They have a really good sense. He has a full offseason now. That the idea that he develops into something more interesting is not crazy.
No, not at all.
And teams have to account for either 2 or 3 gravitational pass rushers. I imagine Zion Ely is going to be used much more situationally as a true freshman. He's not going to be counted on as like a 3-down dude, especially with the guys that are there. But I don't know. Maybe they have crazy packages. You can cover up for a lot on a defense. I don't love Maryland, but I kind of like them. There kind of has to be one of these teams that you wake up and you're just like, they're 6-3. Interesting. And I don't know what they finish, but Maryland's schedule is no Oregon, no Indiana. They do get USC late, but otherwise, they get James Franklin at home. I guess James Franklin doesn't lose to Maryland, but he's wearing a new polo shirt, so who knows what that means. They get UCLA traveling across the country. They get Rutgers at home this year. They get Illinois at home this year. I don't know what Illinois is. Illinois should be better than Maryland. There is Mike Loxley connectivity tissue there. Yeah. Purdue on the road. I think they can be in bowl vicinity this year. I think they're going to win after September. And I don't know who it is. I think we're going to see Maryland jumping up and biting this year's version of Tom Herman like they did way back when.
Yeah, I mean, I like their defense. Big questions about the run game. Clint Trickett, new offensive coordinator, has to figure out some kind of run game. It can't just all be on the arm of Malik Washington.
Agree.
Especially after their top 3 receivers left.
By the way, it wasn't a great passing attack last year.
No.
You can squint and see why Malik Washington can turn into something interesting, but it wasn't effective last year.
Yeah, and the other thing is this is a defense that truly needed some of those havoc plays in order to get by, right? They had like 19 picks. I think it was the most in the Big Ten.
Right.
The players responsible for 7 of them left.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Curious to see which direction it goes for Maryland. I remain optimistic. Here are my final 4 teams then in the conference, okay?
Okay.
In this order, I've got Northwestern, Rutgers, Michigan State, and Purdue bringing up the rear.
Yeah, I have Rutgers ahead of Northwestern, but basically because of Northwestern's schedule.
It is a tough schedule. Northwestern plays the 6th hardest projected schedule.
Yeah.
Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State, Minnesota, and Illinois all on the road. They've got a closing 5 of at Oregon, home against Iowa, at Ohio State, at Minnesota, and at Illinois.
No, Illinois I think is at home.
Or Illinois is at home,
Yeah.
excuse me. That's a tough schedule for a team like Northwestern.
Yeah.
New stadium, though.
Eventually, hopefully.
New stadium.
I've seen a lot of the footage. I've driven by a bunch of times. Should be great.
New stadium supposedly opening up on October the 2nd, of Friday night, when they host Penn State. Northwestern won 7 games last season. They had a top 30 defense. They hired Chip Kelly to come in and hopefully repair the offense. You mentioned Aiden Childs coming down from Michigan State. He's going to be the new transfer quarterback. I have no reason to not like David Braun. I kind of like David Braun. I'm just waiting for them to take the next step. It seems as though they are trying to do that via Chip Kelly this year, trying to transplant some new talent and some new thought into what they can be on offense. But tough schedule, despite the optimism around the new stadium. Whether or not the experiment's going to work remains to be seen.
Yeah, and they were also bowl eligible last season, 6-6 with the bowl win. I would say in large part because they performed really well, credit where credit is due, against 2 teams with fired coaches. Right? They get James Franklin fired. So it's, in the shadow of, that was the game that got James Franklin fired. Yes, it was after the Northwestern lost.
Yep.
So against a reeling Penn State and against a UCLA team that obviously fired their coach, I think 3 or 4 games into the season. And so I just think those 2 teams won't be where they were last year. Though you could argue Penn State was more talented last year. I think just Northwestern was in a more solid place than those 2 teams. And with what their schedule looks like this year, I think Chip Kelly's going to be great for this offense. I just think you're not going to be able to know what you're getting out of Aiden Childs at all times. You're not going to know what you're getting out of who Aiden Childs is throwing to. So I hope the vibes are good. It's the hometown place, but that's a mountain.
So you've got Rutgers ahead of Northwestern. Rutgers has 2 really nice offensive pieces in Antoine Raymond, KJ Duff, but they are replacing a quarterback. They are rebuilding a defense that, for what it's worth, ranked near the bottom of college football.
Overhauled that staff, by the way.
Overhauled the staff.
Yeah.
If you believe in things like preseason SP+, the SP+ sees a top 40 caliber offense.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps the weakest defense in the league, but at least offensively, Bill is seeing this team as being interesting on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, their schedule's decent in that they get some of the more difficult teams on this schedule. They get USC and Indiana at home. They have UMass and BC, which look like they could be wins if Rutgers is decent. I guess that's a Dylan Lonergan revenge spot if he is indeed the starter for Rutgers. There's nothing crazy challenging after that Indiana game. They have road games against Maryland, Northwestern, Michigan. I guess Michigan at home is a challenge, absolutely. Wisconsin on the road, Nebraska at Penn State will be a challenge, but I'm not fully sold on teams like Michigan and Penn State being year 1 ready as being automatic, and Michigan State, which we're going to get to in a second. So I see a universe in which Rutgers can scratch and claw its way to a bowl.
Michigan State.
It's just going to be real tough.
Michigan State, it's Pat Fitzgerald taking over. It was a 4-8 team. They only returned 46% of their production. I think you throw that number out the window regardless. There's just so much new here. I don't know what to make of this team. Like, I have been told that I'm a little bit too bearish on Pat Fitzgerald. That Pat Fitzgerald is a trusted hand. That Pat Fitzgerald, though he was out of the game for a bit,
right,
and those circumstances at Northwestern, the circumstances under which he left Northwestern, were a little bit rocky and all that. People seem to be having more optimism around Pat Fitzgerald than I do. So I am trying to see that side of it. I like Cam Edwards, the running back.
UConn, yeah.
I like Cam Edwards. I like that. I think their quarterback starting point is okay. I think they've got.
Is it Milivojevic?
Sure.
I think that's how you pronounce it.
I have not gone down the rabbit hole yet. Before we get to our deep dive of Michigan State, it is incumbent on me to go out there and find the pronunciation guide. I didn't even attempt it. Did you notice that?
I
was strategic.
Hear you.
I think there are things to like about this team, and I understand why people are excited and feel better about bringing Pat Fitzgerald in. I'm not there. I think it's going to be an uphill climb. This is going to be a huge transition project for him.
Yeah, people seem, I saw some positive vibes about the coaches Pat Fitzgerald hired. I'm mixed. Like, from the mind who brought you no rushing attack at Alabama comes the new Michigan State offensive coordinator.
That's right. That's right. But like a good running back, right? And probably going to be the centerpiece of the offense. So,
yeah.
I seesaw back and forth between optimism and where I've been all offseason, which is relatively pessimistic.
Yeah. Road tilts against Notre Dame, Wisconsin, UCLA, Michigan, and to finish things out, Rutgers, and then getting home. It's a trap game for Oregon, for sure a trap game. I think it's a Friday night game.
Yep.
If Michigan State is anything, it's between Michigan and Washington, the rivalry game for Oregon, on the road in East Lansing. So I will note that. But otherwise,
here's what I'd say about Michigan State. If they want to get to a bowl, they're going to have to do it early.
Yeah.
Because the finish on this schedule is really tough. Michigan, Washington, and Oregon, 3 straight weeks in November before they close out against Rutgers.
Yeah, the Wisconsin game on the road is absolute must-win for Michigan State to go bowling.
And then that brings us to our final team. 18 teams now we've talked through.
Woo! What an episode.
Long episode, but good episode. I've enjoyed this.
Same.
Purdue. Here's what I'll say about Purdue, okay?
Yeah.
We've obviously got them bottom of the barrel here. I think Purdue should be a little bit more stable in year 2 under Barry Odom.
Okay.
I think. Ryan Brown is back. Make of that what you will. They are last in the Big Ten, projected SP+, number 82. 29 transfers. Bit of a staff adjustment. Again, trying to correct things. I think it should make them better. I don't think a bowl is likely for Purdue, but I think stability will be obvious. More stability will be obvious in year 2 under Barry Odom.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment?
I think so. Look, when you look at where Purdue was last year, year 1 of Barry Odom, I'm looking at this now. I'm looking at their SP Plus page. Sometimes schedules are just not fair for a year 1 coach.
Right.
So Purdue, after they played Southern Illinois on September 6th last year, in their final 10 games, of which they won 0 of those games.
Correct.
Okay? They played, so of those 10 games, 9 of the 10 had top 40 SP Plus defenses. That's a lot when you're trying to rebuild. It was another situation where he brought in 1 million new players. I think the one was Rutgers, who they nearly beat, if memory serves.
Right.
You have to judge Purdue based on progress this season, and not necessarily based on results. But if Purdue is indeed making progress, they will play more close games. They might steal a weird one that, like, they almost did it, 2 or 3 years ago against Illinois, the Ryan Brown crazy shootout comeback situation. Like, we're just going to need to see more competitive Purdue. I know the Michigan game was relatively close last year too, but yeah, they've got to be scoring 27 points a lot more often to at least give themselves a fighting chance. And I think that's a fair, mark to judge Barry Odom and this team against. How competitive they are. Because if they are getting to that 27-point threshold, they'll win more. But
They would.
There's just not a lot you can point to right now saying, okay, this is the path. They're going to bomb it downfield more, or it's clear that Ryan Brown has a better fit with this offensive coordinator, or look at all these edge rushers. You can see what they're going for that they brought in from the portal, or, their entire secondary is 24 and a half years old. It's not obvious, but I'm willing to be open to progress.
And I think the additions that they did bring in create more of a legitimate competition on the roster.
Sure.
At offensive line, at running back, receiver, probably the defensive backfield as well. Year one was very much like, let's just plug guys in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what we got. I'm sure there was more science behind it, but that's kind of how it felt from afar. This year, I feel like just with more spirit of competition going on, that's not a bad thing. It just is going to take a while. We knew it was going to be a long rebuild. And frankly, with respect to the schedule, like, they got to win week 2 against Wake Forest, because after that, it's Notre Dame, Illinois, Minnesota, Washington, Penn State, Iowa, and Indiana, all after that.
Yeah.
So it's like, the season could be buried by mid-October, the way this thing shakes out. They're going to need to get some early wins against, teams that maybe they have a shot against. I don't know. Yeah. I'm optimistic that this can be a longer-term rebuild, but I don't think it's going to be the year for Barry Odom either.
There is a little gumpiness to their schedule. If you're a believer in such things, that
I saw that.
Yeah, the Big Ten scheduling overlords are like, okay, let's put Purdue square in the middle of this tough stretch for this team. I won't go through it one by one. We can go through it a little bit in the team portion of the preview, but the overlords are trying in Rosemont, Illinois, to help with Purdue on the upswing.
Solidverbal@gmail.com, as always, is the email address if you got anything to say. This is part 1. We got part 2 and part 3 that are soon to follow. As I said, at some point throughout the course of this episode, we broke it down into 2 groups of 9. In part 2, we're going to cover Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, those 3 teams that we led off with, as well as Washington, Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Rutgers, and Purdue. We'll cover the other 9 coming up next week in part 3. If you have yet to do so, please hit follow or subscribe. Leave us a star rating or review. If you want to help support the team, verballers.com. And of course, if you want to get our free newsletter, solidverbal.com/newsletter.
There it is.
Good episode, a long episode, but we had a lot of ground to cover here as we talked to all things Big Ten.
Sure.
Please come back and listen to part 2 and part 3. In the meantime, for that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself over here, Ty Hildebrandt in Eastern PA, thank you for downloading, for listening, for supporting what we do. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.